My name is Sharon Jenkins, and I am a veteran. I used to be in the Army, and I left the Army as a Specialist 4, an E4. I worked in a boat unit, which is very unusual, because when you think of the Army, you think about, boots and being on the ground. But I had the privilege of my last assignment being in a boat unit. And when we did our drills, we went out on the water. And when we went to the field, that's the way we got on the boat, and we went to wherever we were going to do our field assignment. So I went in around 1974. It was something that I always wanted to do. When I was a little girl, was raised in Hampton, Virginia. And in Hampton, Virginia, there was the Air Force, there was the Army, there was the Marines, there was everybody there. And my mother used to work on base at the hospital, and she, during the holidays, would bring home the wax, or the waves, or the wasps. She would bring them home. And so they became my role models. They looked accomplished. They were happy serving their country. And as a small child, I had the distinct pleasure of falling in love with my country and falling in love with God. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And of course, I got some pushback from my older relatives, because they couldn't understand why a girl would want to go into the military service. But it was something I wanted to do, and I did it. One of my most favorable experiences at boot camp was the fact that I never, ever, ever got in trouble where I had to do push-ups, until I opened my mouth on the very last day and says, I have never done a single push-up, and I have not gotten in that kind of trouble. Well, the drill sergeant, who was a male, said, drop down and give me some. Well, I didn't make it. I didn't make it out. I opened my mouth too soon, so I had to drop down and give him some. One of the things that I remember about my basic experience was the fact that it stretched me beyond what I thought I had the capability to do. And I believe that my passion for wanting to be in the service was the thing that kept me there. I saw people come and I saw people go. And was I the best soldier training? No, but I wasn't the worst. And I also remember distinctly the fact that we were in segregated barracks. The girls were in one barrack and the guys were in another barracks. And that kind of changed when I went to my AIT. It was the very first time that they put the girls and the boys on the same floor. And there were some wonderful kinds of things that happened and some not so wonderful kinds of things that happened. So I remember those times. They were very dear to me. I made some friends. Then no, the truth be told, I never made an enemy. Now, did I have conflicts with people? Yes. Because you put 8 women in one room with 8 beds, somebody is not going to get along with somebody. But I was because I was a little bit older than some of the other, no, I was younger, because I was younger than some of the other soldiers. They had a tendency to want to take care of me. And they did the best that they could. They tried to take care of me. And it was an adventure, it really was. I remember my drill sergeant. One thing that I will never forget that she used to say to me was, girl, you better get your ducks in a row. And I was like, who in the world says that? But from now, sometimes when I'm in a situation where I'm like, I'm not sure that I can do this, I hear her voice say, girl, you better get your ducks in a row. Little short blonde lady. She couldn't have been no more than 5'2". Wear that big drill sergeant hat. It was hilarious. And then the guy that worked with her was this big black guy that looked like a bear. So you can imagine she was standing there with her blonde hair and short, and he was standing there with his tall, big bear-looking Sal Brown. So it was an experience that I will never, ever forget. And one of the most one of the moments that I was the proudest of was the day we graduated, and I got to walk around with my fellow soldiers. It just seemed to mean so much to me to accomplish that feat. And like I said, I saw some come and I saw some go. But I got an opportunity to stay and realize my dream. The other thing that I wanted to say was there is a sisterhood that I learned about being a woman in the Army. A sisterhood that transcends generations. A sisterhood that other people won't get. I can be in the room with a recent recruit, clean through somebody who, was in the Army or the military in the 70s and female, and we understand each other. I think that I know that the military changed us. It created in us this persevering spirit. It pushed us to be what some of us thought we couldn't be. And it's the only thing is that once you turn that button on, you can't turn that button off. We just keep being and keep doing. And some people, sometimes they don't understand our perseverance or why we want to get to the heart of a thing. But part of that is because we learned to recognize that time was important, and to get things done in as efficient way as possible was the right thing to do. So I grew up in the Army. I'll just say it like that. When I went to the Army, I was a little shy, introverted girl. My family, they were like, God, we don't know if she gonna make it. But I made it. And to their amazement, I made it. So, and to mine too. One of the things that I love also about the military is that you never had to worry about where you were going to sleep. You never had to worry about what you were going to eat or what you were going to wear, because those things were always available to you. And some of the things that I did not like about the military was the fact that women were still considered second-class citizens. It was during a time when we were struggling to have a voice in the military. It was during a time when the transition was being made by the government, but the hearts of the male soldiers, they hadn't made the transition. And we faced some obstacles that women in the civilian life faced, but to a higher degree, because we weren't appreciated for the fact that we wanted to serve our country. And it really, for some of us, it really was one of those things that irritated us, because we were willing to put our lives on the line for our country. That's why we joined the military. And to be considered less because of our gender, it really, how can I say it, made it difficult sometimes to stand up and be counted. But I've since then had the opportunity to be in several women's organizations, veterans women's organizations, and it's healing to be together. The sad thing that I have realized now, remember, I was in the military back in the 1970s. So I'm hanging out with these girls that are in the military, have been in the military 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, and to listen to their stories, because I'm a storyteller, so I'm always listening, trying to see or hear what's different, what's new, what's exciting, and to hear some of their stories and them say some of the things that they have had to struggle with in the military are some of the same things that I had to struggle with and the ladies that went in with me had to struggle with. It broke my heart. So my hope and my dream and my vision for the women that come behind me is the fact that they will finally get the appreciation that is deserved them for making the sacrifice, not just for their country, but for their family, and for themselves. I mean, finding their purpose and serving their country at the same time. I mean, most of the kids that go in, they really don't have an idea of who they are. And they get an opportunity to find out who they are on the government's time, and in the interim, be trained to be the best that they can be. So my hope and my dream is simply that the women that come from this point forward will get an opportunity to be valued and to be celebrated and to be appreciated for their sacrifice and the sacrifice that their family have had to go through in order to be apart from them and not have their presence or share those lives or build memories in those with them when they're stationed abroad or if they're in wartime.
Okay, so tell me what it was like to just be in that era of Vietnam, like that period of time. How was that?
Well, I came in at the end, and of course we trained like we were actually going to go to war. Everybody trained because remember, during that time we were going through a major transition. Even though the men and the women were in separate areas and being trained separately, the transition was in place, and so we were being equipped in ways that perhaps my sisters that came before me had not been equipped in. And I remember the rifle range and being at the rifle range and going through the gas chamber and having the gas mask on and all of those things and being frightened out of my boots at that particular time. But I left those experiences with a strength that nobody has ever been able to take from me. Even life hasn't been able to beat that out of me. So, you know, I really am very grateful for that time. Now, what I'd like to speak to is the fact that when I left the military, I actually went back to college. And I worked in the Veterans Affairs office, and I got to see the guys who came back, who had been in the heart of the war, and what they had experienced and how broken they were, and angry to a certain degree. And that also gave me great compassion for veterans. To come back to a nation who could not celebrate you or celebrate your sacrifice. For some of them, they lost limbs, lost families, and to come to a nation who begrudged you, who was embarrassed that you had decided to make a sacrifice for your country. I could see how it would shape them and how it did shape them. And that kind of gave me great compassion for them, but also if I'm ever in a position to do anything for a veteran, I try to go out of my way to do it, simply because I recognize what it's like. So here we have two entities that were not appreciated and celebrated for their service. And what makes my heart smile now is the fact that people are beginning to recognize what military men and women do when they decide to put on that uniform. Another memory that I have, it's gonna make you smile. We did some heavy stuff, so I'll do a little light stuff, is the fact that I couldn't drive when I went into the military. And I worked in the motor pool. And at the time I was married. I'm not married anymore, but at the time I was married and I had a crazy husband. So he couldn't teach me to do nothing. So the fellas, you know, they brave. They gonna put me in a Jeep. What did they do that for? I ran into a pole. And I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? But you know, the way we do in the military, it wasn't a big deal to them. They just shook it off and said, you know, okay, we won't teach you anymore. But, you know, everybody had the fun laughing about it. That's the extent. I had a bruised eagle. That's the extent. So that's the camaraderie that we had in the military. We were family. And a family, what happened to me was just like something that would happen in a regular family. You know, one of your family members had made a boo-boo in the family car, and you just tease them and get it fixed and keep moving on. So the other thing that I remember being in the military and going home, I am from Virginia, and I was stationed at Fort Rucker, Alabama. And, you know, being a young woman, I wanted to be in the military so bad I signed up when I was 17. And there was no getting out of it. No, and I didn't want to get out of it. I didn't want to. I was overweight when I went to the AFI station, and you know, they weren't going to let me sign up, and I took laxatives, and I was in Richmond, Virginia, and I took laxatives to get everything out of me, and I walked all night long. I walked up and down a hill because I really wanted to get in, and I got in. I mean, I was determined to get in, you know what I mean? So I was stationed at Fort Rucker, Alabama. And my husband and I, he likes to conserve. He likes to conserve money. It's kind of cheap, you know what I mean? And so we drove from Fort Rucker, Alabama, all the way to Lynchburg, Virginia, right? And so men, they love to pull alongside the road. And both of us, you know, were in the military. So he pulled alongside the road trying to rest, and I looked out in the weeds, and I saw people in the weeds, but he didn't believe me. He really didn't believe me, you know, I'm just being honest, he really didn't believe me. So when we went over the bridge and looked down at the water, there was the Ku Klux Klan down there burning crosses. So yes, there were people in the woods that looked like ghosts. You know, it wasn't my youthful imagination, but the reality of segregation and us living in a diverse nation kind of hit me in the face. I did celebrate the fact that I was right, though. But it made me look at my duty station a little bit differently when I came back. I was a little wise. It made me grow up a little bit. I do remember that my sergeant, first sergeant, loved the way that I dressed. because I would be the sharpest thing when we had our, when we met in the mornings. I would be sharp. Those boots would be shining. I had creases in my uniform, and people would pull me aside and say, "Stop showing up like that. You making us all look bad." And they were serious. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't. See, I was so happy to be a soldier. You know what I mean? It meant so much to me. And I just, how can I say it? It was to walk in the thing that I really wanted to do and to be what I really wanted to be. You know, you hear all these stories, people get put in the military because they don't want to go to jail, or people go to the military because they can't afford college. But I wanted to go in the Army. I wanted to be in the Army. I wanted that experience, and I got it. So those are some of the things that I experienced, and actually that's why I fell in love with country music, because my sergeant, the sergeant who was over me, wouldn't let me listen to any soul or R&B. I had to listen to country music. Say, you can listen to music, but it's got to be country. And woo, girl, I had to listen to that country music. I listened to that country music so much that I fell in love with it. And so that's where I gained my appreciation. But it has been my honor to serve my country. It has been my honor to see my dream fulfilled, to actually be in the military. Didn't like those boat units too much. I'm just gonna be honest. I'm not a swimmer, believe it or not, and I'm from Tidewater. But it was funny, everybody was getting sick on the boat. You know, they got seasickness, but I didn't get seasickness because I kept eating those rations. And by the time I got over to our little island where we were gonna do our field training, everybody else was sick, but I was. So I guess I'm an adventurer, and it